October, the hot summer still leaves a little tail, nostalgic and refuses to leave. But Chu Feng seemed to be unable to wait, squeezing into the gap and drilling in. Sooner or later he could feel the slightest coolness. Zinky Kindergarten still has half an hour to finish school. The children who are free to move around in the yard are chattering and laughing like little birds. Probably the most carefree stage of life is now. A short time later, a young man appeared at the entrance of the kindergarten, with heroic eyebrows and a haley and white silhouette. A grey windbreaker set him up and straight. He glanced across the garden, looking for someone. On the colorful slide in the southeast corner, a little girl slid down. Her center of gravity was unstable, and she lay down on the ground. She did not cry, patted her and stood up, looking forward, like a ghost. "I want to slip when I shrink." But it was too late. He Yaoding called her, "Xiaomi." Millet shuddered and turned back tremblingly, reluctantly, "Uncle." Xiaomi was born with self-rolling, her eyes were black and bright like a doll. "Where's my mom?" "Your mother has something to go out of town. Let me pick you up. If you want to go to me today, it's still Grandpa." Xiaomi blurted out, "To Grandpa?" It was too obvious. She was a little vacant, stumbled and explained, "I think it's to Grandpa." He Yaoding squatted down, saw her through, and buckled her forehead with his fingers. "I have to paint when I go to Grandpa's house." Xiaomi pouted, "I don't like drawing." "Tell your mom." There were strangers in the yard, and soon a young woman came out from the building and walked to them. "Sir, may I ask you?" Looking down, seeing Xiaomi next to him, it suddenly dawned on him, "Are you Tang Zixin's father? It was her mother who used to communicate with us, and I have never seen you." Millet's name is Tang Zixin, a typical name born after 10. He Yaoding explained, "I am her uncle." Xiaomi cleverly called people, "Teacher Qin Yu." Qin Yu bent down with a smile and touched Xiaomi's curls, "Go and play." Xiaomi didn't dare to move, so he looked up at He Yaoding first. It wasn't until He Yaoding nodded that she ran away like an amnesty. Qin Yu said, "You came a bit early, and school will be over a while later, the teacher still has something to explain." He Yaoding nodded, "It's okay, I'll wait a while." Qin Yu invited him into the building and took him to the rest area of the lobby. He Yaoding thanked him. Qin Yu had already walked to the top of the stairs and glanced back. Somehow, she always felt that he was familiar, maybe he had seen it somewhere. He waited for a while and processed a few work emails with his mobile phone. After a while, the noise in the hall seemed to be a little lower. The children were all called over by the teacher, probably assigning tasks. When the surrounding is quiet, other voices become clearer. There is the sound of the piano not far away, which is the theme song of a movie, "I'm Going to Be With You," the light and playful piano sound, it sounds soothing. He Yaoding leaned back on the colorful plastic chair and listened for a while. The sound of the piano suddenly stopped. After 10 seconds, he changed to the famous piano song "The Wedding in a Dream." Probably it is a song that everyone has heard, but most laymen can't name it. He Yaoding is also a layman, but he knows this song. "There is a girl in my memory, she also likes to play this song." He Yaoding got up and walked towards the end of the corridor looking for a voice. The door of the piano room was ajar. In the afterglow of the setting sun, a girl in a skirt was sitting on the side of the bench with her back to the door. The sunlight hit her body and plated her with a soft gold. Her fingers jumped lightly, and notes flowed from her fingers, dancing with the setting sun. Occasionally turning the face sideways, the straight nose tip and the rosy lips form an extremely beautiful curve, and the shaggy hair around the neck adds gentleness. He Yaoding stared at the girl intently until she realized that there was someone behind her, and the sound of the piano disappeared. She turned around and saw He Yaoding at the door. At that second, He Yaoding's heart beat slightly, and subconsciously tightened his fists. The girl in front of her has delicate eyebrows, fair skin, familiar and unfamiliar outline, as if pulling him into those long-lasting memories hidden in the bottom of her heart. Many years ago, there was a ferocious little girl who yelled at him every day, but when others bullied him, she waved her small fist to block him. She forced him to call her boss. She accidentally injured his hand and was going to buy medicine to let him wait for her. He waited. She never came back. Hello, Yu Xing walked over. What can I do for you? His thoughts were pulled back, and the girl was in front of him. He stared at her for a while, wanting to confirm, but was afraid of admitting mistakes, hesitated. He tentatively said, I am He Yaoting. He looked into her eyes, trying to catch a trace of fluctuations in it. Yu Xing was taken aback for a moment, his face was full of doubts, and he obviously didn't understand why the man in front of him suddenly reported his name. Someone outside called her, she responded, and hurriedly went back to fetch the piano score, took the key to the piano room, and walked to the door. She was a little sorry. Excuse me, you can't enter the piano room casually. He Yaoting's eyes flowed on her face. A few seconds later, he stepped aside and watched her lock the door, turned around, walked calmly, and walked to the invisible place. Did you admit it wrong? Xiaomi, carrying a small school bag, ran over and said, Uncle, you can go. On the way back to his house, He Yaoting drove, and in the child safety seat behind him, Xiaomi twisted his body and squatted on the glass to play. He Yaoting glanced at her through the rear-view mirror. Xiaomi. Xiaomi's spirits were suddenly tense. Hey! Have you mentioned before that you have a new piano teacher? Xiaomi breathed a sigh of relief. Yes. What is her name? Xiaomi said, Teacher Xing. He Yaoting squeezed the steering wheel. What? The star is the star of the sky full of little stars, and the he is the he of the green and green seedlings. Xiaomi learned what Yu Xing said to introduce herself. Milky Milky. He's house. Dinner is ready, He Yaoting asked the aunt at home. Where is Grandpa? Aunt Zhou said, call upstairs and let you eat first. After hearing it, Xiaomi washed her hands and jumped onto the table, bibimbing herself. She has never been vague about eating. He Yaoting was absent-minded. A bowl of rice was eaten quickly, and he hurriedly glanced at the opposite side. Xiaomi was using chopsticks to pick onions. Millet, don't be picky eaters. Millet wrinkled her nose and didn't dare not listen to him, so she put it back in a whisper, I don't like to eat onions. He Yaoting glanced at Xiaomi and suddenly said, I will send you to school tomorrow. Xiaomi opened her mouth. Doesn't it need to be punished so severely for not eating onions? He Yaoting's sister, He Xiling, spoiled her daughter, and her husband was stationed in the Shenzhen branch all the year round, so his stern uncle became the only object of Xiaomi's fear. The kind that will suffocate in 5 minutes alone. Aunt Zhou Tengteng ran downstairs and went straight to He Yaoting. The old gentleman asked you to go to the study. She lowered her voice. Be careful, it seems that something is going on, and her tone is not very good. He Yaoting seemed to have expected the same, and before going upstairs, he asked Aunt Zhou, after a while, Xiaomi has finished eating, let her paint first. Aunt Zhou agreed, looking at his back, squeezing sweat for him. Less than half a minute after He Yaoting went upstairs, there was a slap in the study. Something fell to the ground. The old man roared full of breath, and his voice came downstairs clearly, what a good thing you did. Millet shivered with fright. It was a long time since she saw her grandfather getting angry. Auntie hurriedly covered her ears. Hurry up, we'll go back to the room after eating. In the study of Grandpa He, a few thick hardcover books were scattered all over the floor. He Yaoting's side face had 2 scratches, it was already red, and a faint blood oozes out, which was obviously smashed out by something on the ground. He Jikang got angry when he saw his dissatisfaction, and put one hand on his chest, the other pointed at him. I also hope that you can carry the burden of the He family in the future and see what you have done. Kick the chair and you will be happy? I handed over the website to you to let you learn how to do business, not to be a gangster. He Yaoding put his hands behind him, his eyes kept awake. He hit my product manager. He Jikang was stunned for a moment, obviously unexpected. He stared at him for a while, his tone eased a little. Then you will call back? This is a business field, what a joke. Do you think that the He family has come to this day by gangsters? Fight? You should take those stinky problems to the company when you were studying. I didn't hit him, just warn me, don't touch me. Don't talk back to me. He Yaoding did not speak anymore. In front of outsiders, he is a generous manager Xiao He, black and white that doesn't work well for him, and he's not afraid of anything. Only here with Mrs. He can constrain a little. The old man walked back and forth a few steps, walked around behind the antique table that had been precious for decades, tapped twice with his fingers on the table, raised his eyebrows and said, "Go and apologize." "I'm not going." Rejected simply and neatly. He Jikang had nothing to do with this deadly grandson. He Yaoding didn't wait for him to speak, he bent down to pick up the book on the floor, wiped off the contaminated dust with his thumb, and placed it neatly on the corner of the table. "Grandpa, if you hand over the website to me, you have to trust me completely. I don't need such a partner. I should compensate and withdraw the agreement. I will find a way to make up for the loss, but I will not apologize." Old man he was speechless. The antique wall clock on the east wall of the study is ticking, and the grandfather and grandson are not looking at each other, and the atmosphere in the room can freeze. He Yaoding glanced at the time. "I have to go, you remember to eat." When I returned to my home, it was already 9 o'clock in the evening. He Yaoding took off his coat when he entered the door, flicked the car key on the porch cabinet, and went directly into the bathroom. After a while, there was a rushing sound of water inside. The bathroom door was not closed tightly, and warm steam continuously gushed out of a narrow gap. He Yaoding squeezed a few men's facial cleansers and rubbed it on his face twice. The side of his face was faintly painful before he noticed the scars on his face. He is a little helpless, the old man really can do it. Take a shower in 10 minutes. He drew a bath towel around his waist at random, his body was steaming hot, and water drops slid all the way from his strong and wide chest and melted into the soft bath towel. Open the refrigerator and take out a can of beer, and wipe out more than half in one go. Turning around, I saw that the light in the study was still on, probably I forgot to turn it off yesterday. He walked over, put his hands on the table, lowered his head, and closed his eyes. Yuzheng's unfamiliar eyes today were all in his mind. Drops of water dripped onto the table with a clatter. He opened his eyes, opened the drawer, found an old notebook, and pulled out a yellowed photo from it. In the photo, a pretty-looking girl with a ponytail was attacking a thin boy with a water gun. The boy's eyes seemed to be in the water and closed tightly. Two little hands were subconsciously blocking his face, but his expression was smiling. Very happy to be bully. He Yaoding clicked on the little girl's face in the photo with his hand. Perhaps feeling uncomfortable, He Yaoding poked vigorously. Ungrateful. He turned his eyes and saw the scar on the back of his left hand. In 12 years, you have changed from an arrogant and agile girl to a gentle and indifferent woman. I can still recognize you at a glance. Long time no see, Yuzheng. The author has something to say, have not seen you for a long time. This book is an event, draw a big koi to get 10000 JJB, draw 5 familiar IDs with 1000 JJB per person, please refer to the scarf at Miss for details. Still love you. In addition, the old rules have red envelopes for opening comments. Early the next morning, He Yaoding sent Xiaomi to the kindergarten on time. He got out of the driving seat, opened the back door and unbuttoned the child safety chair for Xiaomi, hung a small school bag on her body, and led her to the yard. I don't know what kind of kindergarten every morning, but it seems to be too lively today. The children who had already arrived gathered around the west of the yard, 3 floors inside and 3 floors outside, one by one, very excited. Xiaomi was never absent from this kind of thing. He broke away from He Yaoting's hand and rushed over. The small school bag buckled behind her. Yuzing knelt down on the ground. She didn't wear a coat, only a loose beige sweater with a soft texture. The sleeves were rolled up, the folds were piled on the elbows, the drain nets on the ground were taken apart, her shoulders sank, and her face was almost on the ground, slender and white. With his arm stretched in and out, a lot of mud has been rubbed against it. From time to time, the cat's cry came from the water pipe, weak and pitiful. Probably the arm was not long enough, and the hair was not touched. Suddenly, a tall figure came over, and Yuzing's arm was pulled out with carelessness. There was a hoarse voice in his ear that was unique to early morning, "I'm here." The man's fingers are slender and beautiful, pinching her small arm, the palm of his hand is warm, and he releases it in just a few seconds. She was squeezed aside and saw the angular face, the stinky face that hadn't received feedback after reporting her name yesterday. She pursed her lips quietly, and the corners of her mouth rose slightly. He Yaoting took off his coat and stuffed it to Yuzing. The woolen coat was thick and stuffed into a big ball. Yuzing hugged and smelled the faint smell of laundry detergent on his clothes. He Yaoting rolled his arms up his sleeves, supported the ground with one hand, and touched the kitten when he went in 3 fishes and 2 fishes with the other hand. The kitten screamed sharply, not knowing whether it was pinched by his hands or scratched by something else. Yuzing blurted out, "You be lighter." He Yaoting paused, then turned to look at her, and Xiaomi asked, "Uncle, have you caught it?" The man turned his head, lowered his body and snorted, his arm gradually retracted, and a small white and grey cat was brought up in his palm. The wild cat that came from nowhere was stuck in the sewer pipe. It was thin and dirty. Xiaomi wanted to take it with excitement. He Yaoting raised his hand to a high place, "Wash and hug." Xiaomi pouted, looked up, and uttered, "Uncle, your hands are bleeding." He Yaoting glanced sideways. There was a hole under the thumb of his right palm, which was probably pierced by a rock or iron wire below. He was pretty indifferent, "It's okay." 2 teachers came out and brought the children in. There were only 2 people left in the yard. Yuzing pointed to his wound, "I have a medicine box, or go to my place to get some medicine." He Yaoting glanced at her and raised the cat in his hand, "What about it? Leave it to me." She wanted to take it, and He Yaoting hid, "Dirty, just tell me where to put it." Yuzing looked around, went to the corner to turn out a small cardboard box, went in and took out an old mat, and temporarily placed it in the corner of the yard. He Yaoting followed her to the piano room. Yuzing has her own office, but she still stays in the piano room most of the time. He Yaoting found a seat and sat down, watching her rummaged in the small cabinet, and took out a small medicine box. She sat opposite him, looking for the disinfectant and ointment inside. "I will give you a simple treatment first. You should go for a tetanus injection when you have time. I don't know if there is rust underneath." He Yaoting placed his left hand on the table casually, tapped his index finger on the table, and looked at her faintly. The scar on the back of his hand was so obvious that he deliberately dangled in front of her eyes. Yuzing found hydrogen peroxide and cotton swabs, but didn't see the same. She really seemed to have forgotten him. That winter 12 years ago, they were in the 6th grade of elementary school. In the first snow of that year, the fluorescence was dazzling, a thick layer fell, the dust was suppressed, and the air seemed to be much better. The school organizes senior students to sweep snow. Yuzing's face was red with cold, wearing a knitted hat, a scarf, and thick cotton shoes. She stepped on it with one foot, the snow covered her ankles, and a few pieces of snowflakes leaked into the stockings, cooling the silk. She raised the shovel, a little bit uncomfortable. It's a pity that all such beautiful snow has been cleaned up." He Yaoting stood beside her, bending over to work. This small area was assigned by the teacher to both of them. After he finished scanning, she didn't need to scan it. "My backyard is more beautiful than here." If you like it, I will take you there. The boy developed late, when he was a little shorter than Yuzing. Yuzing smiled, his eyes bent like crescent moons. Not long after, the little girl raised her hand and accidentally knocked the shovel on the back of He Yaoting's hand. The blood drenched immediately, and she was frightened, teardrops crackling and falling down. He Yaoting endured the pain, with a serious face, comforting her with a serious face like a little adult, "It doesn't hurt at all." He was afraid that the teacher would criticize Yuzing, so he didn't tell the teacher that the two sneaked back to the classroom. Yuzing pushed him on the chair, "You wait, I'll buy medicine." He Yaoting lowered his head, the back of his hand was bleeding. When he looked up again, the person was gone, and there was a pink hairpin lying on the ground. He picked it up, wiped it off, and put it in his pocket. Since then, he has never seen her again. Later, I heard that she was picked up by her family that day and went abroad. Was walking away crying. He suddenly felt cold on his hand, and He Yaoting recovered. Yuzing leaned closer, placing his fingers on his palm lightly, "Don't move, I will clean up the dirty things." Her fingers were slender and soft, and a bit cold. When he got close, He Yaoting could smell the unique body scent of the girl, a little bit of toffee. Yuzing looked down and helped him clean the sludge on the outside of the wound. He changed a cotton swab, soaked it with hydrogen peroxide, and applied it to the wound. He Yaoting stared into her eyes. This girl seems to be different from before. At the end of get out of class, she would run out, jumping rubber bands, pocketing, and plaiting. There was no quiet time. Probably it's the 18th woman. It's a lot quieter now, and the volume of speech is reduced. All right. Yuzing cut a piece of gauze, simply fixed it to the wound, and raised his head, "It's best not to get wet in these 2 days." He Yaoting retracted his gaze and said, "Thank you." Yuzing glanced at the time, it was not too early. She walked to the side and took his coat over, and found a few places dirty. The mud on her arm accidentally rubbed it up. She rubbed it slightly with her hands, but didn't get it clean, looked up at him, "I'm sorry, my clothes are dirty." He Yaoting glanced at her head and didn't care too much, "It's okay." Yuzing was still a bit sorry, "Why don't I wash it for you?" In fact, it was just a polite remark, but he did not expect that he actually agreed, "Okay." He took out his mobile phone, clicked a few times, transferred to the dial interface and handed it to her, "Enter the phone, notify me after washing, and I will pick it up." The November shopping festival is a carnival for e-commerce. Preparatory work has started a few months ago. Consumption preferential policies, shopping subsidy settings, product reserves, the huge pressure on the back-end processor caused by the surge in traffic and the surge in orders must be planned and deployed in advance. The day's meeting was over. It was already 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The old sister He Xiling had already returned. Xiaomi didn't need He Yaoting to pick him up. He didn't worry about leaving get off work. He stayed in the office for a while and received a call from Qin Hao. Same place. The person Qin Hao asked about, he himself was late. When he pushed the door in, He Yaoting was already inside, and there were a few buddies who often played together. There is a private room for their fixed use in the Dynasty KTV. A few buddies gather here at intervals. Outside are all human-looking young masters and public figures. There is no special exception for entering the house. You will be fined 3 cups for being late. He Yaoting sat in the corner, with his long legs folded on the low table, half leaning against the sofa, with an unlit cigarette in his mouth, his arms casually placed on the backrest behind him, and the whole person looked relaxed and comfortable. 2 years after graduating, he was vigorous and vigorous. He had his own set of rules for doing things. It seemed like a model of success. Only he himself knew what it was like. The He clan's various people, seemingly peaceful and prosperous, but undercurrents are in fact turbulent. Why does he, a 20-year-old boy, take over a hugely profitable website. Just because the old man likes it. His lack of real ability is not enough to calm everyone's anger. Only in front of this group of buddies who have been mixed up since junior high school, can he let go of the tight strings. Qin Hao was forced to punish him by the crowd. He said that he drove the car, or if he drank a large glass of lemon bitter gourd juice before getting out, squeezed to He Yaoting's side, speaking with a bitter gourd smell, and elbow him, "What are you thinking about, so absorbed?" He Yaoting narrowed his eyes slightly, bit the cigarette in his mouth, and said after a while, "I miss a girl." Qin Hao was taken aback for a moment. "I rely on it. What is the situation? Which girl is so powerful and can handle Mr. He?" He Yaoting smiled faintly, tilted his head and took out the lighter, lit the cigarette, and took a sip. The smoke surrounded his nose and lips, shrouded him in the hazy. It seemed that the whole person was a bit unreal. He said, "Don't tell you." Qin Hao cursed, and then saw the 2 scratches on his side face, which were actually not obvious anymore, but He Yaoting's skin was clean and his complexion was very healthy, not as rough as the elders, so there were some traces. "What's wrong with you, girl scratching? Fuck off." He rubbed his eyebrows. The old man smashed his book with a book. Qin Hao snorted, gloating, "Does he know about that?" Qin Hao rejoiced, "My old man, my body is strong enough to clean up you without ambiguity." He also lit a cigarette for himself. "By the way, you are so merciless and bullish, that man and your second uncle, the relationship is very close, now you are determined to offend your second uncle." He Yaoting didn't say a word. He extinguished his cigarette after 2 mouthfuls, and took out the phone and checked WeChat. For 3 days, Yuzing didn't contact him. He couldn't hold back at noon today, searched the phone number and added her WeChat, but it hasn't passed yet. Qin Hao couldn't sit still, and ran over there to sing in a while. He Yaoting touched the can of beer by himself, and the phone rang after opening it before drinking it. He Xiling is always up and running, and speaks quickly. "Are you busy?" "No, Dynasty." He Xiling, "That's right. I'm at the cafe in Xinjia. The millet painting class is over for half an hour. It's the one near the Dynasty. You can pick it up for me and send it over. I'll take her back to Grandpa's in the evening." He Yaoting put the beer back on the table. "Why don't you go by yourself? Meet an old friend, reminisce about the past." He Xiling mysteriously said, "You know, too, you must be happy to see her." The author has something to say. Red envelopes in this chapter continue. Here again. The same thing was said last time, but when He Yaoting went, there was a pretty big girl opposite He Xiling, who went on a blind date without saying a few words. He Yaoting was too lazy to ask who it was, and hung up the phone after agreeing. That Qin Hao ghost cried wolf howling, sang 2 songs, was thrown back, grabbed the dried fruit, and watched He Yaoting get up and put on his coat, and asked him, "Is this going away?" He Yaoting was half wearing his clothes, one arm was still stretched, and he was sure to look at him for a few seconds, then suddenly curled his mouth. "Give you a chance? Qin Hao, hey." He lowered his head and sent the address of the painting class to Qin Hao. "I said you love Xiaomi all day, and I didn't see any action. Go here to pick her up, and send it to Xinjia Cafe. My sister is waiting there." Qin Hao and He Yaoting's sister and brother, and Xiaomi's father Tang Huili, the 4 of them have played together since junior high school. It is considered a revolutionary friendship. Xiaomi is the only next generation of them, so naturally they are very much loved. Qin Hao is especially so, often embarrassing and sabotage with Xiaomi. Xiaomi likes him the most. Qin Hao really took the bait, 100 willing, picked up the phone and ran away. He Yaoting couldn't hold back. He laughed for a while, and he had nothing else to do, and he sat back leisurely. The group of people on the other side sang enough, and they organized a game to play cards and called him over. As a result, within 10 minutes, Qin Hao called. He was mortified and said that his car hadn't left the parking lot yet, and the woman behind her kicked the gas pedal on the bottom of his car, and the two of them talked. For a long time, the woman was still aggrieved and cried, just like what he did to her. Buddy can't go away, you go to pick up Xiaomi as soon as possible. Sister Xiling is anxious when it's late. He Yaoding secretly scolded, this guy, never can count on him. No way, he Yaoding looked at the time, there are still 10 minutes, and drove to pick up Xiaomi. The car drove all the way to Shinja Cafe, he Yaoding led Xiaomi and pushed the door in. After turning his eyes around, he saw he Xiling by the French window, and there was a pretty girl sitting opposite her. The bell on the cafe door is still jingling. Yuzing glanced back, his eyes hit he Yaoding at the door, and he couldn't help laughing, revealing a neat row of beautiful white teeth. Blame it's pretty. He Yaoding looked a little stunned. Here. He Xiling waved at them. He Yaoding walked to the table, and his eyes touched Yuzing. The girl looked at him with a smile, without a trace of surprise. Xiaomi ran over and said hello, Teacher Xing. Yuzing touched her little curly hair, hello. Xiaomi squeezed beside Yuzing, he Yaoding pulled a chair and sat on the opposite side. He Xiling was very excited, remember her? Yuzing, she is teaching piano at Xingqi. I haven't seen her for so long. If she didn't talk to me first, I didn't recognize her. He Yaoding's words were still faintly uncomfortable, we have seen it. People don't remember me. He Xiling was stunned, I saw it. When did you see it, why didn't you hear it? Yuzing couldn't help smiling gradually, well, I have seen it twice in kindergarten before. The man opposite gave her a look. They are all old acquaintances, and he Xiling's chattering box is a little unstoppable, and chatting arises. That year the siblings transferred to their school together, the younger brother was in the 3rd grade, and the sister was in the 6th grade. He Yaoding is thin and small, doesn't like to talk, is not close to anyone, and is quite withdrawn. He is often bullied by tall and strong boys. He Xiling is so high that it is impossible to protect his brother all the time. It didn't take long for her to find that the little brother's desk mate seemed good. A little girl, not tall, wearing A3 bars on her cuffs, and every shift to check her hygiene every day, she looked serious and violent, and no one dared to provoke her. He Xiling secretly gave Xiao Yuzing a lot of delicious food, and asked her to take care of her younger brother. This care is 4 years. Speaking of these things, as if it were still yesterday, he Xiling lamented that she loved memories when she was older. After a while, Xiaomi tugged at her sleeve, Mom, I want to hush. He Xiling pulled 2 tissues and took Xiaomi to the bathroom. There are only 2 people left on the table. He Yaoding looked at the smiling girl opposite, and sighed, recognize me now. Want to see how long you can bear it? He Yaoding was taken aback, did you know that? The girl raised her eyebrows. He gritted his teeth, pretend you don't know me and tease me. Stingy, long time no see, tease you, see your face smelly. The two looked at each other for a few seconds and laughed at the same time. Without the little loss in my heart, he Yaoding suddenly relaxed a lot. Looking closely at the girl in front of me, she was the same as before, with a small face and 2 dimples. She smiled sweetly and looked comfortable. No wonder she became a kindergarten teacher. Children are born to like it. He asked softly, when did you come back? Not long, a few months. What do you do when you come back? Are you leaving? Yuzing lowered his head and sipped his coffee, automatically ignoring the first half of the sentence, and only said the latter, it depends. She looked at his hand, how is the injury, better? He Yaoding moved his fingers, and the bandaged gauze was removed by him long ago. He didn't take it seriously at all, okay. Yuzing hummed and said nothing. Xiaomi ran all the way from the aisle and squeezed to Yuzing's legs. He talked about a lot of children in the kindergarten. Yuzing was very patient. He kept watching her eyes, listening carefully, and asking questions from time to time. Xiaomi said more. Exciting. He silently pulled Millet back and pressed it on the chair. Okay, drink some water. She raised her head and said, that's how she is, when her mouth is not idle. Yuzing smiled, this is great, children just need to communicate more. He sighing, you like children so much, and you have a fun with yourself. By the way, do you have a boyfriend? The opposite side has been playing with the deep he youting coffee stirring a spoon. Yuzing said, not yet. The coffee spoon continues to stir. He sighing was clear, okay, I'll pay attention to you. She pointed to he youting, this kid is also single, and he has been messing with a bunch of all day long. If you have something suitable by your side, you can also introduce him. He has listened to you since he was a child. He youting hissed, impatiently, too much control. But the other side responded, okay, I'll look back. He glanced at her hard. He sighing didn't pay attention, you are much gentler than when you were a kid, do you remember that the boys in your class were afraid of you at that time? Yuzing smiled faintly, and an unknown light flashed in his eyes, I was young at that time, and I was not afraid of anything. He sighing put on a jacket for Xiaomi, it's getting late, I have to take her home, she asked Yuzing, where do you live now? Yuzing said the name of the community, and he sighing nodded, let him send you, and I will ask you again the next day. She clicked on Xiaomi's forehead, since I have this little thing, I have been around her all day, private time it's so pitiful, it's pure debt collection. It was very windy outside, and he sighing drove Xiaomi away, leaving two people standing on the side of the road. Yuzing's bangs were all blown away. She tugged at her collar and buttoned her clothes tightly. Turning his gaze to the side, he youting's windbreaker was open, and the thin black coat inside also unbuttoned 2 buttons, revealing a healthy and beautiful complexion. It looks cold. She rubbed her hands and covered her lips, you don't go along the way, I can just take a taxi by myself, not far. He youting put his hands behind her and pushed forward slightly, get in the car. He directly let her sit in his co-driver, drove to the main road and turned a corner. Yuzing sighed, wrong, my house is over there. That road is one way. Oh. At the beginning of the lights, the neon lights flickered all the way through the prosperous area of the city, and the staggered light and shadow hit the face of the man who drove. Reflecting the dimness behind, the outline is clearer. In fact, he youting's face didn't change much, and Yuzing recognized it that day. When he was young, he had the kind of likable Zhengtai face, clean and refreshing, his brows were full of unwillingness to admit defeat, but it was a pity that he was long and thin at that time, and he couldn't win fights and was always beaten. After so many years, his facial features have grown, he has lost the childishness of a boy, and added the masculinity of an adult man. I have to say, it's pretty good. At a red light ahead, the car came to a halt slowly, and he youting faintly looked over, it's been a long time since I watched, haven't you seen enough? Yuzing was slightly embarrassed, his mouth stiff, I didn't look at you. He seemed to be in a good mood and smiled again. Assistant Sherui called, his face became serious after only a few words, the green light in front, he passed the intersection, controlled the steering wheel with one hand and stopped on the side of the road, listening intently on the phone. When did this happen? Sherry, this morning, the news spread widely 2 hours ago, and now the most popular headlines are all this news. He youting cut out the call interface and clicked on Weibo. As expected, the screen was full of news that the chemical content of the LH brand exceeded the standard, and long-term use may cause cancer. He thought for a while, and asked Sherui, what do other malls and stores say? Sherry, the time is too short, so far no seller has responded. He youting tapped his finger on the back of the phone, and after 10 seconds, he made a decision, I am planning to announce that LESI Yupin will immediately remove all ELF-related skincare products until the investigation results come out. The official blog will publish it as soon as possible. I'll forward it. Sherui immediately said, but LH has always been the top 3 in sales of our skincare series. It will be on the shopping festival. Now it is off the shelves, all pre-sales will be stopped, which has a great impact on us. I know. Sherui hesitated, that. Removed. Sherui sighed and nodded, I see, do it right away. After hanging up the phone, He Yaoting did not drive immediately. He held the steering wheel and tapped his fingers rhythmically, not knowing what he was thinking. Yuzing asked in a low voice, what's wrong? He took out a cigarette and held it in his mouth without igniting it. He bit it dry for a while, then threw it into the grid and restarted the car. It's okay, I will take you home first. Yuzing rented an apartment, a small duplex of more than 30 square meters. Below is the kitchen, bathroom, living room, and the upper floor is the bedroom. Although the Sparrow is small, it has all the internal organs, is light and luxurious, and is especially suitable for single young people. The car stopped at the gate of the community. She got out of the car and He Yaoting followed. As soon as he walked to her side, a sense of oppression hit him, and he was a head taller than her. Yuzing joked, reaching out on tiptoes and touching the top of his head, what did you eat and grow so tall? He Yaoting paused, his attitude was close and casual, as if he had gone back to many years ago. She was a little taller than him at the time and often patted him on the head like this. He choked at her, it seems that foreign countries don't support people, why don't you grow up? In fact, Yuzing among the girls is not short, but he is very petite when compared with him. Yuzing didn't get angry when he heard it. He took 2 steps back and smiled at him, thank you for sending me back. I'm leaving. She turned around and just walked 2 steps, and the people behind her called her. Yuzing turned his head, He Yaoting shook his phone, I added your WeChat, pass it. The author has something to say, when you see this line of words, I am sending out the red envelopes before. This chapter will continue, right? When Yuzing arrived home, he threw himself on the sofa for a while. She kicked the slippers, rubbed her head in, adjusted a comfortable posture, and took out the phone. Although Yuzing has WeChat, there are no people to contact in China. Only a few friends are colleagues in the kindergarten, so she doesn't think much. Open the interface, and sure enough, there is a new friend waiting to be verified. The avatar is a pure black picture, with the white letter H in the lower right corner, and the nickname is also an H. He was right. Yuzing agreed, stared at the blank chat interface of the two for a while, and suddenly remembered what he had just said in the car. She turned to Weibo. Search for Lizi Yupin, the first account that appears is the official blog of Blue V, a well-known domestic e-commerce shopping website. The speed of the official blog is fast. It has been less than half an hour since the phone call, and the notice has been issued. The content is basically the same as He Yaoting said. It is announced that all LH skincare products will be removed from the shelves immediately, and the final test results are awaited. She clicked on He Yaoting's Weibo, and the certification stated, Lizi Yupin is the current CEO. He reposted this Weibo of the official blog 5 minutes ago and promised that if the final test result shows that the brand does contain carcinogens, then all users who buy this product from LECU can enjoy free return service, and at the same time assurance, LESI Yupin resolutely resists such products that are harmful to the human body, and guarantees the personal safety of users to the greatest extent. The comments underneath were applauded, the 3 views are super positive, the conscientious enterprise, and a few He Yaoting is my husband are mixed in the middle. Yuzing searched Weibo for news related to He Yaoting. A bunch of labels, e-commerce leader, several outstanding young people, and occasionally gossip with female celebrities. This stinky boy is so prosperous now. It wasn't the little boy following her anymore. She stared at the picture of He Yaoting on the phone for a while. He was attending an awards ceremony. He was sitting in the guest table with a handsome side face and a tight jawline. He nodded slightly and listened carefully to the people next to him. She tapped her fingertips to exit the interface. After sliding down twice, I saw another piece of news. The famous painter Shen Tingyi will hold a 7-day exhibition of his personal works in the southeast art district of the city on October 25. She didn't know when the corners of her lips gradually fell, and her mood was inexplicably irritable. She threw the phone on the small coffee table and pressed it onto a plain painting exhibition ticket. She took her pajamas and went to take a bath. 20 minutes later, Yuzing came out of the bathroom. The heating period had not yet arrived. The room was a bit cold. She was wrapped in a thick coral velvet nightgown and her hair was wet. After the bath, the skin was pale with a hint of pink, and the fragrance of the shower gel had not yet dispersed. She tilted her head and wiped her hair slowly with a dry towel. Go to the bathroom to dry your hair and go upstairs to rest. Put on the sleep aid incense, leaving a small night light. Touched the little monster pillow on the side of the pillow, and said softly, "Good night." For some time after that, Yuzing was very busy. She is a part-time piano teacher. She only comes to kindergarten when there are classes. But during this time, the kindergarten is preparing for a cultural performance. The young female teachers are all-rounders. All become dance teachers. Even Yuzing was taken to rehearsal. She found a lot of dance videos on the internet, and she was also looking for places to rent costumes and props. By the way, helping the life teacher take care of the children is almost busier than full-time. After eating at noon, it was the time for the children to take a nap. The small beds in the activity room were neatly arranged, and Xiaomi was lying on the side against the wall, tossing and turning. Yuzing was afraid of waking up other children, walked over with light steps, squatted on the side of her bed, rubbed her cheek with his finger, and asked softly, "What's the matter? Don't sleep." Millet frowned, twisted her body, and said concisely, "Upset." "It's the same as a little adult." Yuzing endured a smile, "What's the matter?" "I hate painting. My mother will let me learn to paint, as well as the host and dance." Yuzing touched her head, "For your own sake, I want Xiaomi to become a good person in the future. But I'm going to be exhausted." This phenomenon is also quite common. Parents hope that their children will become dragons and their daughters will become phoenixes. Since their children are 2 or 3 years old, they want to enroll in all interest classes. Sometimes I look at these children, who are so young, and they are filled with time every day, which is pitiful. Yuzing didn't say anything, and covered her with a quilt. Unexpectedly, Xiaomi said, "There is also Uncle." Yuzing stopped and focused on her, "What's wrong with Uncle?" "Millet was wronged to death, why does he always come to pick me up lately?" Yuzing laughed, "Don't you like him?" "You don't know, he is so fierce." "Yes. Yeah," Xiaomi complained when he got the chance, "it's more annoying than my mother. As long as he comes to pick him up, I can't go play with the rocking car. Finally put this little thing to sleep." Yuzing's mobile phone vibrates, and when the child sleeps, she will adjust it to vibrate. It was He Yaoting who sent WeChat, "Are there any arrangements for the weekend?" Go straight ahead, go straight to the subject, without turning a corner. Zing, I have something on the weekend, what are you doing? Have a date. Zing, no. Nothing. I think it's okay to take you back to school and see if there's anything to do. Yuzing smiled and replied, "Well, another day." After thinking about it, he said, "Your clothes are still with me. I always forgot to bring the clothes I washed for him before." He Yaoting said, "No hurry." She did not reply, nor did he continue to post. Today is the first day of the exhibition. There are a lot of people, some come here on purpose, and some hang out in the art district. Yuzing wears a beige overcoat and carries a bag slung on his side. His hair is loose, and the whole body is slender and soft. The exhibition hall is rebuilt from an old factory building, with 2 floors above and below, retaining a lot of architectural pipes, painted in various colors, very distinctive. Yuzing turned around, and finally stopped in front of a picture. It is an oil painting with strong colors. In the painting is a colorful winding path, the evening sky is beautiful with red clouds, the old-fashioned street lights are dim, it is raining, and a slender woman in the distance, holding a light blue umbrella, is about to disappear in the corner. Like a departed lover, leaving me sad all the way. Name below, shadow. She watched it for a long time. Like this painting. Yuzing was startled when there was a voice around him. Turning her head to see the man, her eyes trembled. The man around him is quite temperamental, and he wears a delicate and decent black tunic suit. Although he is middle-aged, he is not old at all and is well maintained. She looked straight and unconcealed. I know you. Oh. There is a picture of you on the news. Shen Tingyu smiled, stopped speaking, and turned his gaze back to the painting. After looking at it for so long, what do you see? This painting is Shen Tingyu's early work and his famous work. It is also the first exhibition in more than 20 years. There are 5 paintings in the exhibition that are not for sale, and this is one of them. In a few words, Yuzing broke the creative emotions contained in the painting one by one. Art critics say that this painting means a young boy's sentimentality and is a broken love, but Yuzing said, if it is a broken love, she pointed to the sky in the painting. It won't be so bright there, colorful, it should be dim. In my opinion, this is more like a crush on a young youth. Full of hope for the future, carefully guarding the beloved girl. Shen Tingyu seemed to be touched by the past, and was taken aback. When he looked at the past, he couldn't help but become more interested in her. You are very young, but you have a unique vision. The second floor of the exhibition hall. He Yaoding and several partners admired the painting and chatted. Originally, today's entertainment had already been turned off, and then temporarily said that he could come, which made assistant Sherui messy. After a while, he became a little bored. He used the excuse to go to the bathroom and walked to the top of the stairs to breathe. His gaze swept downstairs at random and saw a familiar figure. Yuzing stood in front of a painting, was petite, and talked happily with the man next to her. He Yaoding frowned slightly. Not far away, someone called Shen Tingyu, he responded, and Yuzing blurted out, please wait a minute, please. Shen Tingyu looked back. I like your painting very much. I don't know if I have the opportunity to invite you to have a cup of tea. I also collected one of your paintings. I have a lot of questions I want to discuss with you. Shen Tingyu looked at the young girl up and down, watching her playfully. You want to discuss with me? Nod. It's kind of interesting. He laughed, took out a business card from his pocket and handed it over. I will be very busy these days. I should stay here for a few days after the exhibition. You can find me then and we will have a good chat. Yuzing took the business card with both hands and squeezed her fingers tightly. She looked up and saw that Shen Tingyu had already walked away and merged into the crowd not far away. She stared at the distance for a while, until the phone rang. She picked it up, and he Yaoding simply said, look up. Turning his head to look upstairs, he Yaoding leaned against the railing upstairs and stared at her owingly. I said something is going on, just to come to the exhibition. She raised her head, are you here too? He Yaoding hung up the phone, walked down the stairs, and quickly came to her side, with his hands in his pockets, lazily, you are quite foreign, do you understand? Seeing him, Yuzing was very happy, and patted his head smoothly, pretending to be angry. How do you say it, who is the boss forgotten? Her soft fingertips touched the skin between his forehead, and the top of her head exploded like fireworks, and it was piping hot. He Yaoding's heart beat, and he turned his head aside uncomfortably, chin a little in Shen Tingyu's direction. Who is that person? Yuzing glanced back and stuffed the business card in his bag. The organizer of this exhibition, the painter Shen Tingyu. What are you so happy to talk about? Give you your business card. It's nothing, are you still watching? He Yaoting watched her zip up her coat. Are you leaving? I'm going to. He touched the phone to broadcast a number. Wait for me. The phone got through, and a young man wearing glasses ran upstairs. He stood where He Yaoting just stood. Ms. He Yaoting, I have left beforehand. You can help me deal with them. Sherui, but Mr. Wang has something to discuss with you. You tell him that if you drop 2 more points, you will sign the contract on Monday. If it doesn't work, then forget it. Yuzing grabbed his bag and said, I'll go home when I'm fine. You can do your job. He already took her wrist and went out. I'm not busy, invite you to dinner. He had a big step, and Yuzing couldn't keep up with a few steps. When he got outside the exhibition hall, he slowed down and let go of her wrist calmly. Yuzing quietly breathed a sigh of relief. What to eat? You decide. He walked in front, tall and strong, and several girls passing by couldn't help but look at him. Yuzing secretly rolled his eyes behind him. I'm really overbearing as the president. He speaks like he is asking for money, and he bounces word by word. Yuzing got on the co-driver, the seat belt seemed to be stuck and couldn't pull it out. She twisted and pulled hard. Suddenly the whole body was enveloped by a rush of heat. He Yaoting leaned forward, wrapped her with an arm, and reached for the bottom of the seat belt. His snort was right on her neck, and Yuzing's breathing was stagnant, and he dared not move. I also smelled the faint smell of laundry detergent, not pungent, very comfortable, with the breath of male health. The face is a little hot. Okay. He pulled out the seat belt and buckled her carefully. Someone called him. He listened for a while, glanced at Yuzing subconsciously, and said, Okay, I see the situation. Hanging up the phone, he said, My friend is in Dynasty, let me go, together. Yuzing hesitated, I won't go, I don't know him either. All young people love to play. He looked at her for a while and didn't force it. Okay, I'll tell them, I won't go. Yuzing quickly held his hand. Don't, then I'll go. It's bad for her to make a friend's appointment. He Yaoting did not speak anymore, controlled the steering wheel to kick the accelerator, and drove to Dynasty. As soon as the two entered the door, the noisy crowd inside was instantly quiet, and they cast a body spell, staring blankly at the girl next to He Yaoting. During the party, I never saw anyone with him. This was the first time. Qin Hao winked his eyebrows, curious, Mr. Xia he hasn't introduced him yet, who is this beauty? He Yaoting's palm was wrapped behind her, warm and powerful. Yuzing, my boss. The author has something to say, red envelopes continue. The music in the box was very noisy, and Qin Hao didn't hear clearly. What? Yuzing was embarrassed, and touched his arm with his arm. I am his classmate. Everyone suddenly realized that since it was the classmate Xia he, that was his own person. Soon 2 hospitable people led her to sit down. If the other girl, she would have passed by with a glass of wine, but she was brought by He Yaoting. The people, they didn't dare, just pushed the drink in front of her, let her not be restrained, open to play. He Yaoting quickly sat next to her and saw that she was still wearing her coat. Isn't it hot? Yuzing hadn't attended such a lively party for a long time, and didn't know him yet. Sitting here was quite restrained. When he heard him, he felt a little hot, so he took off his jacket. He Yaoting took it naturally and folded it twice and placed it on the corner of the sofa. Above his coat. Qin Hao, who had been peeking at them all the time, couldn't believe his eyes. This caring body and gentle eyes, the black-faced he knew he was not alone at all. It's a ghost. Reminiscent of He Yaoting telling him that he was thinking of a girl that day. At that time, he thought he was joking, but now that it might be true, I can't help but become more curious about Yuzing. The people He Yaoting brought will naturally not be neglected. Everyone is a young man, who loves to talk and laugh, and quickly merges together. Using is no longer uncomfortable, and occasionally can say a few words. Someone mentioned, "Old he is fine, LH did a great job." Others joined in the fun and talked about it. Once the issue of possible carcinogens in LH cosmetics spread through the internet, Lesi Yupin was the first seller in China to announce its removal. The internet response was fierce, and netizens bought it. After a few days, the average daily sales of other products were not affected, but rose 5%. The overall pre-sale amount during the shopping festival has also steadily increased. He Yaoding's timely and correct decision has undoubtedly made a huge advertisement for Lesi Yupin. Compared to the profit of giving up LH, it is simply worth the money. On the second day after that, other merchants only recollected their tastes, followed closely, and announced that L-related products would be removed from the shelves. He was very satisfied with this matter and praised him for the first time. They were still saying that he Yaoding didn't seem to feel much, and asked Yuzing if he would drink some orange juice. Unexpectedly, the girl suddenly pulled his collar, her lips approached his ear and said, "You are so amazing." With a soft voice and warm breath, with the girl's body fragrance, he Yaoding's brain buzzed, and he reacted almost immediately. His body was tight, he coughed uncomfortably, "I'll go toilet." As soon as he left, the atmosphere in the box immediately changed. Everyone must be curious, and the words that were afraid to ask just now come out. "You are his girlfriend. When we were together, I have never heard of it. Is it interesting to fall in love with him? Every day, he keeps a straight face." Yuzing couldn't laugh or cry, explaining one by one. After a while, he Yaoding came back and frowned when everyone was surrounded by Yuzing. "What are you doing?" Everyone shouted and dispersed, everything was the same. He sat back next to her and turned to look at her. She blushed as if she had drunk. "Still hot?" Yuzing shook his head, "No." There were different games, playing cards, singing, and it was very lively. He Yaoding said, "Do you want to sing?" She shook her head, "Go and play, leave me alone." He didn't leave either, thinking about sending her off for a while. He didn't drink, took an empty glass, first filled her with the drink, and then poured it for himself. "There were a few strangers in the game today. I don't know who brought them to play together. Among them are two girls, dressed in open and bold clothes, and bold in drinking and singing. Unlike Yuzing, sitting quietly in the corner. One of them had an impure purpose, and he came to He Yaoding. When he saw a girl with him, he felt cold, thinking that he had a master. Later, she realized that she was just a classmate, not a girlfriend, and she became active again. While singing, watching Yuzing go to the bathroom, she put down the microphone, took a glass of wine, walked over and sat next to He Yaoding. She had nothing to say. He Yaoding still patiently answered a few words, and then realized that she always rubbed him with her calf intentionally or unintentionally, so she had a dark face, and when the cup was put, he left the door without saying a word. When Yuzing came out of the bathroom, he saw He Yaoding smoking at the end of the corridor. He was tall with a sharp profile, half of his face reflected in the light and shadow. He saw her, pinched a cigarette and walked over. She asked, "Why don't you go in? It's boring, let's go." It was originally his friend's game. He said to leave, Yuzing naturally had no objection. She wanted to go in and get something, but He Yaoding stopped, "Wait for me here." He turned around, put on his clothes for half a minute, and took her coat and bag out. She was still wearing her coat, and he had already carried her women's backpack and went out, not knowing what the rush was. "Hungry, find a place to eat." The two found a hot pot and ate slowly. He said that he was going to buy something, but when it was dark at the end, he sent her home. "This time I stopped at the gate of the community, and Yuzing said, 'Go in, I'll return the clothes to you.'" According to his words, he drove downstairs according to the route she pointed. Yuzing got out of the car, bent over and said to him, "Wait for me." While waiting for her, Qin Hao called, "Why did you suddenly leave at noon?" He Yaoding, who brought the two women. Oz who, what's wrong? Tell him, don't get anyone in the future, it's smoky. Qin Hao couldn't figure it out. No, what happened to you girl? Nothing. The two said a few more words. Yuzing hadn't come down yet. He hung up the phone and looked up for a while, not knowing which one was her home. Yuzing called. She seemed to lower her voice deliberately, he Yaoding. When he came out of the elevator, Yuzing was still hiding at the entrance of the firefighting corridor, looking out. Seeing he Yaoding, he quickly walked to him and pointed to his door. The door opened a gap, and it was dark and silent. Yuzing was really taken aback just now. The door was locked in the morning. The meeting door was open. Obviously a thief had entered. At this time, I don't know if the thief has gone. She was a girl, and she didn't dare to go in while holding the phone. After observing in the fire corridor for a long time, he finally called He Yaoding. He Yaoding only said, "Wait there, don't move." He didn't hang up, so he talked on the phone like this until he saw her. She was a little nervous with affection, and she could see that she was a little scared. He Yaoding's footsteps were very light, with his arms wrapped in front of her, he pressed back and motioned for her to go farther. Very powerful and very secure. With a serious expression, He Yaoding glanced around in the corridor, then went to the fire corridor, found a stick in the corner of the wall, held it upside down in his hand, and clenched it tightly. He didn't hesitate, his figure quickly melted into the darkness, and quickly turned on the light after entering the room, and he came out in less than a minute. Never mind. Yuzing breathed a sigh of relief, only to realize that the palm of his hand was sweating. He did enter the thief, and the house was turned over in a mess. He Yaoding didn't move anything on the ground. He stepped over and walked a few steps in, and then asked her, "Let's see if there is anything missing." Before the words fell, Yuzing had already rushed in, and went straight to the closet on the second floor. The door of the cabinet was opened, and a painting was intact and leaned to the side. She sighed slightly. Checked it again and only lost a laptop. "Do you want to call the police?" Yuzing felt troublesome. "No, there is nothing important in it." He took out the phone. "Let's file it." This kind of case happened every day. The police in the area took photos as usual, asked a few words, and left Yuzing's phone number, saying that she would be notified if there was news. When everyone was gone, it was too late, and Yuzing was a little sorry. "I'm sorry, I've been tossing you for so long." He Yaoding looked around. "Are you still living here tonight?" Yuzing pursed his lips. "I can't stay here." She checked the door lock. "The door is not broken, it can be locked, and there is a door chain, it's okay." She recovered quickly. In fact, she was no longer afraid just when she knew that there was no one in the house. "I have been accustomed to everything by myself in foreign countries these years." She sighed. "The princess is gone." "Princess? Well, it's the cat you rescued from the kindergarten before." Later, the cat was checked and there was nothing wrong with it. The kindergarten could not keep pets, so Yuzing simply took it home. Probably ran down the crack of the door. He Yaoding, the naming style is similar to that of Xiaomi. How did Xiaomi get it? Her silly dog is called Master. He looked at her. Cats have cat life, dogs have dog life. It will come back by itself if it is uncomfortable outside. You should worry about yourself. He walked to her. "It's so messy, it will take a long time to clean up." "Don't live, I'll give you a room nearby, and I'll find the cleaner tomorrow to clean it up for you." Yuzing kicked the things on the floor aside, went to the kitchen to pour a glass of water for He Yaoding. "I have something like this, it's worth a cleaning trip, and it will be done in a while." She had bright eyes and a smile on her face, as if she was really fine. He Yaoding took the cup, touched her cold finger, and paused. He didn't say anything, and drank half a cup in one sip. Then you will clean up tomorrow and rest early. He walked to the door, thought for a moment, and turned around and said, you can drink more hot water. Yusing blinked, not quite understanding. The hands are cold. After saying this, he helped her close the door. After a while, Yusing heard that the door was pulled a few times outside, and seemed to confirm whether it was firm. She lowered her head, feeling strange in her heart. A long-lost feeling of being pampered and cared for. This messy house doesn't seem to be that annoying anymore. After the man left, the room was horribly quiet. She played music on her mobile phone, simply rolled her hair into a ball, and began to tidy up. It is impossible to let these things lie on the ground overnight. Fortunately, there are few things and the house is small. I cleaned up in less than 2 hours. Finally, I wiped the floor. It was already past 11 o'clock. She helped her sore waist, took a shower, and threw herself directly on the bed. When he tilted his head, he saw his coat still hanging on the vertical garment ironing machine. Forgot to give it to him again. I took the phone and looked at it. There was a WeChat lying quietly on the phone, which was sent 2 hours ago. Call me if you have something to do. She stared at the line for a long time, and dimples appeared shallowly. After replying to WeChat, she lit the sleep aid incense, turned off the headlight, and turned on the night light. Touched the little monster by the pillow, good night. Downstairs. The light of the window that belonged to Yusing finally dimmed. The people in the car put out their cigarettes. Slightly step on the accelerator and slowly drive out of the community. The author has something to say, red envelopes continue. Yusing didn't expect that she would actually be on the hot search the next day. Although it was removed in just half a day, it was still seen by the gossip Qin Yu. Yusing usually has a warm temper, which is not very noisy. During this period of employment, he has not heard of a boyfriend, and the exposure is big news. Qin Yu suppressed her excitement, as if it was herself that was exposed. You have such a boyfriend, why never tell us, so tolerable. Yusing didn't understand, what boyfriend? She took Qin Yu's mobile phone and saw the so-called revelation. It was a dim photo. In the KTV, she and He Yaoting were sitting next to each other. She pulled his collar and put her lips to his ear to speak. He Yaoting had a seemingly nonchalant smile on his face, so it seemed that he was indeed intimate. It should be the time to praise him for being awesome. I don't know who was photographed, and it was posted online. The entertainment blogger who broke the news provided a paragraph. He Yaoting, CEO of LEC Yupin, reproduces a mysterious new relationship, and the woman is a kindergarten teacher. I also added a lot of gas and vinegar to say a lot of unmarginal words. Qin Yu still said, he has come to pick up Xiaomi several times before, and I am familiar with it. It turns out that it is the owner of LESI Yupin. Yusing ignored her and looked at the comments below. Shu Yu is a popular film and television Xiaohuidan, the image spokesperson of LESI Yupin, and He Yaoting's high school classmate. With a lot of unpleasant words mixed in, Yusing quit Weibo and returned the phone to Qin Yu. Qin Yu didn't notice the slight changes on her face, and asked her curiously, how are you two getting better? He met Xiaomi after so many times. No, Yusing pursed his lips. He is my classmate, not a boyfriend. You also believe what you wrote on the internet. After speaking, she took the piano score and went to the piano room for class. A new kid arrived in the past 2 days, and Yusing found time alone to teach her basic fingering. Later, when everyone was gathered, he started to take lessons. This lesson teaches insects fly. Not all children learn piano. Piano lessons need to be charged extra. Only those who need it can register. There are fixed hours of class every week. They are extracurricular classes in kindergartens. Extracurricular classes also include art, English, small host, dance, taekwondo, and go. He Xiling originally wanted Xiaomi to learn the piano, but during that time she had a small host and dance, and she had to go to another place for art classes. The time was not available, and she was afraid that it would be too nervous. Ns. After the class, Yuzing was the only one left in the piano room. She did not leave, and lay on the table, pressing her finger to turn on the screen, turning it off, and then turning it on again. Finally, she clicked on WeChat and sent He Yaoting, "Have you read Weibo?" Probably he was busy, or he hadn't seen it yet, and he didn't return after 10 minutes. Yuzing waited for a while, but still did not reply. She packed up and prepared to go. Unexpectedly, he called directly. First explained, "Just in a meeting." "Well," she asked again, "have you watched Weibo?" He Yaoting's tone was casual, as if he didn't take it seriously. "I saw it." "Please explain." Yuzing was a little anxious. "They said we are in a relationship. If there is anything to explain, you can't control other people's mouths." She picked the side of the piano score book and whispered, "Didn't you also explain it when you were rumoring an affair with others?" There was a moment of silence on the other side, and then there was a string of low laughter, as if in a good mood. "Did you search for my news? What concerns?" Yuzing silently bowed his head and knocked off the table with his forehead. "I did search for his name when I was idle, but there weren't many serious things, most of it was his love life. The shrimp soldier and crab will not mention it, the highest rate of appearance, the most powerful one is Xiahua Dan Shuyu. It is said that the two knew each other in private, and Shuyu's endorsement of Lesi Yupin gave a friendly price. The two were handsome and beautiful, and they didn't run together. Although He Yaoting Feng has clarified that the two are only a cooperative relationship, the woman has never expressed her position, neither admitted nor denied. Her attitude is very ambiguous, so media netizens do not buy it, and their names can always be linked together on the internet. In fact, Shu Yu chased He Yaoting for a while in high school, but he did not agree. Later, He Yaoting went abroad to study, and she was admitted to the film school after graduating from high school. Being the endorsement of Lesi Yupin is also a resource given by the brokerage company, which is completely coincidental. When He Yaoting asked this, he was on his way back to the old lady He's house. He controlled the steering wheel with one hand, with the other hand resting on the edge of the window, rubbing his temples with his fingers. "Laugh unscrupulously." The girl was speechless when he asked, and found an excuse to hang up without saying a few words. He was in a good mood and turned on the car music. In fact, he can guess who took the photo without thinking about it. That day, the party was all done by my own people, and 80% of them were done by outsiders from those continents, which was too much. Today, He Yaoting found someone to withdraw as soon as he knew the hot search. "By the way, I called Dazhu and asked him to warn those people not to make trouble in the future. There is basically no chance, and I will not take them with them in future gatherings." Although he is not a traffic star, he is also regarded as a public figure. He has long been accustomed to these things, but Yuzing can't. Fortunately, Yuzing is just an ordinary person, and netizens are very busy. The battlefield is changing every day, and within a few days, he will be left alone. Suddenly recalled the photo that broke the news in my mind. Her warm breath seemed to be still in her ears, and the sound of "You are so amazing" was like a colorful firework exploding above his heart, gorgeous and intoxicated. The fireworks fell to the ground and the heat was hot, and the feeling has not dissipated yet. When the car stopped outside the villa area, He Yaoting went to the supermarket to buy a lot of Xiaomi's favorite snacks and fruits, as well as the big face lollipops that she had been clamoring for but had never bought for her. Xiaomi knelt on the carpet and wrote on the coffee table. He Xiling kicked her small from behind, "Sit up straight and write well." Millet's right hand was like a small meatball. After writing for a long time, the pen fell and stopped. "Why do I have so many strokes of my name?" I don't want to write it anymore. Tang Zixin. For a kid who has just learned to hold a pen, it is indeed a challenge. Xiaomi accused her of her name more than once, saying it might as well be called Tang Xiaomi. As soon as He Yaoting entered the door, Aunt Zhou took the bag in his hand. He walked over and threw the big-faced lollipop in front of Xiaomi. Xiaomi yelled in excitement, and immediately unpacked and chewed. That lollipop is as big as her face. He Xiling was very interested. What are you doing, Uncle Five? Buying a lollipop is good to her. Am I bad to her before? He Xiling leaned forward, looked carefully at his spring-like face, and concluded, you are in a good mood today. He Yaoting raised his eyebrows, not denying it. He Xiling said, second uncle is upstairs. He glanced upstairs, in the study. Well, Grandpa said you are here and let you go up too. Father, he has only 2 sons. The eldest son died young, and now only this second son He Qian is left. Everyone agrees that he must be the helm of He's future. However, He Ji often handed the most profitable website to He Yaoting, who had just graduated the year before, and only let He Qian be responsible for the traditional offline industry. He Qian was calm on the surface, and in front of He Yaoting was still a modest and generous elder, but everyone could tell that he was actually very unconvinced. A while ago, He Yaoting's product manager had a conflict with an important supplier, and he actually took advantage of his close relationship with He Qian. He Yaoting was young and vigorous and protected his calf, so naturally he would not let the people under his hands be wronged. After leaving school, the solution to the problem is no longer the same as before, but he is not polite, and he has lost face to some extent. Today is the first time that the nephew and uncle meet after that incident. He Qian is only in his 40s, well-maintained, looks very young, and exudes the atmosphere of the upper-class elite. He had a gentle face and could not see anything unusual. He first praised He Yaoting about the LH brand incident, without showing any dissatisfaction in front of the old man. He Yaoting also apologized, and He Jikang felt relieved and asked him to sit down. When the 3 meet, the topic is always inseparable from official business. For about an hour, Aunt Zhou came up and said that dinner was ready, and several people went downstairs. He Xiling had already put on coats by the sofa. Grandpa, I have an appointment with a friend, and I will not eat at home. He Jikang answered and walked to the restaurant. He Xiling took the bag and dialed the phone and walked to the door. Zing, I'm out of the house. He Yaoting's figure paused, and when he turned his head, there was no sign of him. He walked to the table, sat down opposite He Qian, absent-minded, and turned his head and glanced at the door. He Ji often noticed that he was habitually trained to do not concentrate on anything. He Yaoting couldn't sit still and got up directly. Grandpa, I remember that I have to go back to the company. You eat first, second uncle, I'm leaving now. Without waiting for the 2 of them to react, he walked quickly to the sofa, pulled his coat and ran. He Xiling's car was stopped when he reached the door. He Yaoting directly turned on the co-driver and sat in. My car is out of gas, take me back to the company. He Xiling was stunned for a moment, but I didn't go along the way. Then I will take you there first, let me use the car, and then I will pick you up when I'm done. He turned his head to look at her. Who did you have an appointment with? Zing. He Yaoting expressionlessly, oh. When Yu Zing saw He Xiling with someone behind him, he looked around subconsciously. I just fell off the hot search on the internet, and I was seen eating together again. It's really hard to tell. He Xiling was relaxed and walked briskly, seeing that Zing scared us. Don't worry, he is not a star, no one is following him. He Yaoting sat down next to the old sister and was disgusted. Why are you following here? Don't you want to go to the company? He touched the opposite Yu Zing with his eyes, and quickly moved away. Have not eaten, I am hungry. Yu Zing lowered his head and poked the drink straw. The 3 people ordered 4 dishes and a fruit plate, and after waiting, they talked about it. He Xiling talked a lot. Last time I was surrounded by little tail and didn't have a lot of fun. This time he opened up and said. First, he hugged himself all these years when he went to school to marry and have children, and then asked Yu Xing. Have you never returned to China again? Yu Xing nodded, I haven't come back. He Xiling, how about over there, is life convenient? Well, there are many Chinese in the place where we live. It's just that it's harder to read, so we must learn the language first. He Xiling laughed, the environment is there, and the acceptance level is definitely faster than that in China. Then find a handsome guy to teach you, to pronged love language. How about falling in love with a foreign handsome guy, it feels very different. He Yaoding was playing with the phone with his head down, raising his eyelids when he heard the words. Yu Xing said, I have never had a relationship with a handsome foreign guy. He Xiling didn't believe it, you are so beautiful and have a good personality. Haven't talked about it. Yu Xing thought for a while, I have to say that there is one, but it is not a foreigner, it is a Chinese student. He Xiling came to be interested. It was a few years ago. The Chinese student was very handsome, mild-tempered, and very gentleman. He shared an apartment with a friend and was a neighbor of Yu Xing. He is very good at taking care of people. After knowing him for a long time and getting acquainted with him, the little girl had a little thought. The boy didn't know if she was interested in her. Neither of them pierced the layer of paper anyway. When the boy returned to China, the two broke off and never saw him again. Thinking about it now, in fact, unrequited love is not counted as unrequited love, it's just the careful thought of a 17 or 18-year-old young girl. When I meet a boy who is close to my eyes, I always want to take a look. Speaking of later, Yu Xing ate the fruit plate that came up first. The grapes were fresh and full and attractive. She stretched out the fruit lottery, and the one she was aiming at was picked up by He Yaoding. She glanced at the other side, He Yaoding had no expression, put grapes in her mouth, lowered her head and pulled the phone. She went to get the dragon fruit, but he was one step ahead. He Xiling glared at him, what's going on, so many, I have to grab Xing. He Yaoding put his chopsticks up and stood up. He Xiling, where to go? Gone. Isn't it hungry? It's about to be served. Stop eating. The author has something to say, random 30 red envelopes? The man walked with wind without looking back. He Xiling murmured, what's wrong, ignore him. She remembered something, Xing, are you interested in teaching piano? Oh none. Yu Xing, Xiaomi wants to learn. Yes, this kid has had trouble with me several times. I don't want to learn to paint all the time. She thought that her character is too noisy and that learning to paint can be calm, but she is not interested. Yu Xing nodded, it's more. He Xiling took a sip of juice, so I want to stop painting and the host for her, let's learn piano, piano also cultivate temperament. Yu Xing teaches piano in kindergarten. It is Oneto money. If you want to further your studies, this level is not enough. She asked, does Xiaomi agree? Have you ever asked? After asking, she didn't need to paint as soon as she heard that she agreed to everything. She stabbed Yu Xing, how about it, think about it. This matter was naturally okay, and Yu Xing agreed very happily. After the matter was settled, the two people concentrated on eating. This Sichuan restaurant is very good. He Xiling can eat spicy food. It is rare that Yu Xing also loves it, so I decided to go here. The restaurant is very popular and the food is slow. Fortunately, they are not in a hurry. After eating, the two settled their bills. As soon as they opened the door, the cold wind filled their necks. Yu Xing shrank his head, or call him. No, that kid is busy when he is busy and he is busy when he is free. I don't know what time it will be. I will take a taxi and go back by myself. Yu Xing put on the hat on the back of the woolen coat, showing only half of his face, like a little witch. Well, I will accompany you to choose the piano in a few days. He sighing nodded and shook the phone. Tianlian. A rental car came, and Yuzing let her go first. The next taxi quickly followed, and stopped beside her. As soon as she gripped the handle, she heard two beeps behind her. She looked over. In a white car not far away, He Yaoting was sitting in the driving position, with most of his face hidden in the dark. Looking at it from this angle, the shape of his face was very good, and those eyes flickered with the refraction of the lights of passing cars. Dark. The two looked up, and He Yaoting honked the horn again. The driver opened the window. Would you like to go? Yuzing let go. I'm sorry, I won't go anymore. She walked a few steps quickly, and the window of the co-pilot opened at the right time. She bent down slightly, her face smaller in the big hat. Didn't you go to the company? Came back. So fast. He Yaoting hummed and asked her, are you going home? Give you. Yuzing played the piano with slender and stylish fingers. She grabbed the collars on both sides to prevent the wind from entering. Sister Siling is in the car in front, or you can call her. He Yaoting glanced at her faintly. Can't get on. Yuzing blinked. Go. The two didn't talk much all the way. He Yaoting answered two calls, both on official business. The shopping festival was here in a blink of an eye, and today is also a meeting for most of the day. Yuzing tilted his head and looked at the scenery outside the window of the co-pilot. What are you going to buy during the shopping festival? Yuzing was probably thinking about something, and turned his head. Hey! He smiled, turned the steering wheel, and turned into another road. Don't you girls all have a bunch of things to buy? Yuzing reacted and said, there is nothing to buy, you can buy it any time you use it. He Yaoting laughed softly, you are quite reasonable. Thinking of his shopping website, Yuzing said, I also bought things from Lesi Yupan. Really? What did you buy? Yuzing choked, did not say, bought a few packs of ants towels. He Yaoting also didn't care, I will give you a few gold cards back, no threshold to use. The car quickly drove downstairs to her. Yuzing got out of the car, bent over to look into the car with his hands on his chest, raised a smile, thank you. He Yaoting raised his chin as a response. The girl ran into the corridor. The person in the car did not leave, took out the cigarette case, twisted one in his mouth, lit it, and took a breath. His eyes narrowed slightly, his head tilted, and he placed it on the backrest, slowly exhaling smoke rings. After a while, He Yaoting glanced upstairs and found that the light in her window was off. Haven't entered the house for so long? Thinking of the thief in her house last time, He Yaoting couldn't sit still, so he put out the cigarette and got out of the car and walked into the building quickly. As soon as I went in, I found that it was dark and there was no light, and the elevator indicator light was also dim. Is there a power outage? This apartment building has only 10 floors. Generally, higher buildings have backup power for elevators. He Yaoting turned directly into the fire stairs. His legs are long, and a few large steps are 1 floor. When he reached the 3rd floor, he found a dark shadow on the stairs between the 3rd and 4th floors. The little ball shrank there, the bright face of the phone turned pale. He called out, Zink. Yuzing heard his voice and was stunned, it's me. After a pause, you haven't left. He Yaoting approached and saw her sitting on the steps, holding the bag in one hand and pressing the ankle with the other. He didn't answer her question, and squatted in front of her and looked at her feet. Why are you sitting here, what's wrong with your feet? I can't see the road clearly, I twisted it a bit. She explained, it's not serious, just wait for a while. He Yaoting didn't say anything, the car key was stuffed into her pocket, and his arm stretched directly into her leg socket, and lifted the person up easily. This person was not prepared at all. Yuzing became nervous and subconsciously pushed his chest. Hey! Hold you up! The man's arm was firm and strong, and his left hand was gentlemanly avoiding Yu Xing's chest. Yu Xing blushed quietly and whispered, "I can walk by myself." He didn't stop. "Then what are you doing sitting there, watching the scenery?" "I am heavy." Already on the 5th floor, He Yaoting deliberately teased her, stood still and turned upside down. "Well, it's quite heavy." With that said, Yu Xing's face turned red, and he pushed him, "Then you let me down." He Yaoting's collar was not high, and her cold fingertips touched his flesh, soft to the touch with a hint of chill. He Yaoting frowned, "Your hands are always so cold." In the darkness, the girl hummed softly, "It's like this all year round. I'm used to it." Smelling the smell of smoke on his body, "Just for a short while, did you still smoke?" She had long discovered that he was addicted to cigarettes. He Yaoting learned to smoke when he was in junior high school. At that time, Yu Xing had just left. He was in the first year of junior high. He no longer bullied, ganged, fights, smoked, and drank like before. He quickly became the bully of that middle school. His grades were average, and he was hanging from the middle and back. This situation continued until high school. Old Mrs. He didn't know how to send him abroad to study until he returned from school 2 years ago and took over Lesi Yupin. But this smoking problem has continued to the present. He hummed, "It smells bad." "No. I have reached the 7th floor, and the lights in the corridor are on. The call is coming." He Yaoting didn't let go of the girl's hand, but his pace slowed down. He saw the red apple-like face in his arms. He tilted his head to one side, smiled while pursing her lips, turned his head and looked at her seriously, just about to speak, suddenly found that the girl was holding more than one backpack in her arms, and that hand was still tight. Holding a black jar tightly. "What is that?" Yu Xing clenched his hands a bit, "Nothing." Grasping tightly, but He Yaoting still saw a line of small characters in the gap between his fingertips, and smiled enduringly, "Anti-wolf spray." Yu Xing gritted his teeth, "What's wrong? It was so dark just now, who knows who suddenly ran up." She paused and added, "I have a strong sense of prevention, can't it?" He Yaoting has already reached the 8th floor, "Okay. Open the door and enter the house." He put her on the sofa. Yu Xing was very light, he held her up a few floors as if playing, and didn't pant at all. "I looked around the house, clean and tidy, completely different from the last time I came." Yu Xing moved to the side of the sofa and patted the empty seat, "Would you like to sit for a while?" He Yaoting didn't move. He stood condescendingly in front of her and touched her shoes with his toes. "Can I go now?" Yu Xing tried to move his ankle, "It's much better." He glanced upstairs, "How can I sleep in a while so I can go upstairs?" "Can." She remembered something, "You happen to be here. Take your clothes away. It's upstairs." He Yaoting agreed and went to the door to change slippers. Turning around, there are no men's slippers, only women's slippers. Pink plaid, soft texture. Let him wear this pink and tender thing, it is funny to think about it, besides it is too small, the man's feet are wide, and it is estimated that a large part of it will be exposed, and he simply goes upstairs barefoot. The upstairs was similar to what he thought. The furnishings were simple, with a bed, a bedside table, a built-in wardrobe, and a hanging ironing machine not far from the stairs. His windbreaker was ironed and hung there neatly. Yu Xing's beddings are all matte colors and look warm, with a picture frame on the bedside table. He walked over and picked it up and took a look. It was a photo of her and her mother. It should have been when he was a child. The little girl in the photo was exactly the same as Yu Xing in his memory. Beautiful and clever. There are other things on the table. A small incense burner, a box of incense, black hairpins, and some odds and ends. He picked up the incense and glanced at it to help sleep. Fingertips swiped across her little hairpin, and finally stopped on a business card. "Shen Tingyu. It's the painter." Downstairs Yu Xing saw that he hadn't come down, and shouted, "Did you see it?" He recovered, I saw it. Carrying her clothes downstairs, she told her a few words to confirm that there was nothing wrong with her feet before leaving. Probably because he robbed He Siling's car tonight and asked her to take a taxi home by herself, He Youting felt guilty and bought her favorite durian mill by the way when sending the car. Millet watched TV like Buddha with her short legs crossed. The remote control in her hand was turned up and down by her. He Siling yelled that she could not eat to lose weight at night, and she cut the cake inconsistently. Xiaomi changed the channel and called out, Uncle Qin Hao. He Siling looked up. On TV, Qin Hao looks like a dog in a suit. He is a well-being program host, and his reputation basically covers his community and surrounding vegetable markets. The young guy was like a wild horse 1 second before, and the camera opened, eating flowers in spring, leaves in summer, fruits in autumn, root vegetables in winter to keep healthy. Wearing a pair of glasses is gentle. I don't know how many uncles and aunts have fooled me. It is estimated that many of the health and brainwashing articles reposted by middle-aged and elderly women on WeChat are from this type of program. Every time He Youting saw his swearing and serious appearance, he wanted to smoke him. As soon as he got up, the phone on the table rang. He Siling saw it. Coincidentally, the man on the TV called. She was scared and patted Xiaomi's ass. Go, wash your face and brush your teeth, and get ready to go to bed. Millet ran away. He Siling pressed the speakerphone, and the whistling voice, Sister Siling, did you look for me? I just didn't hear it. He Siling, I want to ask if you have time next Tuesday. Xiaomi Kindergarten has conducted an anti-trafficking exercise. Parents are going to go. I am going to Shenzhen to celebrate my birthday in Huaili, and I probably won't be able to come back. He Siling is just a love mind. Even if she has a child, her husband is still the first in her heart. In addition, the husband and wife have not seen each other for a long time, so she gives priority to Tang Huaili's birthday, which is not surprising at all. He Youting paused, and the scroll in his hand was rolled. What an anti-abduction exercise! It's just a drill to prevent children from being trafficked. He Youting sighed, it's not bad for your daughter to abduct others. With the book closed, he leaned back on the sofa lazily, casually, why do you want him to do this kind of thing? Is he my uncle or my uncle? He Siling glanced at him, aren't you busy? I think you haven't rested well recently, and you have dark circles under your eyes. Good. Second uncle embarrassed you because of that? No. He walked over and hung up Qin Hao's phone, I will go next Tuesday. The author has something to say, random 30 red envelopes? Anti-abduction exercises. As the name suggests, an exercise to prevent kidnapping. This kind of exercise is now common in kindergartens all over the country, and there are many ways. The most common is to put children in the activity room, where the facetofus parents play the traffickers, and use candies, iPads, and other items to trick the children. Someone once used a stick. Tang took a class of children away, and the whole army was wiped out. This method has a drawback, the teaching intention is too obvious, and the on-site effect is unreal. In some places, there are even parents watching. Banners and videos are all available. Even if the children are taken away, they will not be too impressed. This time, Zinke Kindergarten uses a more rigorous model, with completely unfamiliar faces, hidden cameras, and strives for realism. All parents watch the real-time broadcast video in the observation room. He Youting was the last one to go in. The observation room was not big, and Huiyanjiang was filled with parents, mostly mothers, and several fathers in between. He walked to the last row and sat down. The young mothers in front were discussing the current hit series. After a while, they changed the topic and accused his husband collectively. A bit noisy. The next window was knocked several times. Yuzing hugged the piano sheet and leaned at the window to look at him. Why are you here? He Youting's complexion obviously improved, and he smiled. My sister has gone to Shenzhen, and Xiaomi's father is birthday. Someone over there called her. Yuzing responded, then turned his head, I'm leaving. He watched her run away in a hurry, leaving a faint fragrance in the air. Start soon. The principal is a middle-aged woman, with a gentle face and a good temper, a typical young child practitioner. Everyone briefly communicated a few words, there was not much nonsense. The countdown to the exercise entered, the projector screen appeared in the large activity room, and the small window was the courtyard and another classroom. The children were scattered in different places, ignorant or not aware of anything. At this time, a head was poked into the door, and Yuzing came back again, the head of the garden. The principal walked out, what's the matter? One of the actors has acute appendicitis and has just been taken to the hospital. The director frowned, do we still have spare actors? Yuzing, no, they have a division of labor. If they appear too many times, they will also attract attention. The principal considered it, then we can only choose a parent who is unsightly. Yuzing suddenly remembered something, squeezed to the door, and pointed to the last row, how is he? Tang Zixin's uncle has not been here a few times, so he should be fine. The head of the park followed her gaze. The men in the last row were looking out the window, with their hands in their pockets. Dala was sitting there, tall and occupying 1.5 positions, waiting a little impatiently. Corporate celebrities like He Yaoting are not blushing. Most people who surf the internet have heard his name, but they are still very vague about his appearance, and he can be recognized by media reporters on the street. On the internet, people who want to sleep with him, marry him, and to be honest, most of them just look at him on the road. Oh, this person is a little handsome and familiar. Isn't it a celebrity? It's over. The head of the park was a little embarrassed, is your face a little bit fierce? Without affinity, children are not so easily fooled. Yuzing, it is a bit fierce, but he is also very good when he is not fierce. I know him. I don't have time to think about that much. Most of the people present are regular kindergarten visitors. There is really no more suitable person to pick up and drop off the children every day. He Yaoting was invited out. After listening to the director's words, he didn't really want to accept at first, but now he represents Xiaomi's parents. It is not good to be too indifferent. After careful consideration, he said, I don't know how to act. Principal, it's very simple. You can do what you usually do to tease the child now. I don't tease children. The director couldn't answer for a while, and Yuzing took her arm, I'll tell him. As soon as the principal left, He Yaoting said, your idea? How can I do this? Yuzing frowned, you are too serious. Xiaomi is afraid of you. You should have more contact with children. She clenched and opened her hands slightly in front of his eyes, like a flower exploded, smile more, you look good when you smile. When she said this, she didn't consciously laugh, and wanted to show him as if she had two shallow dimples, her skin was white, and her eyes were sincere and unexpected. He rolled his apple twice, and the roots of his ears gradually turned red. Don't open your face and relax. Turning around again, she persisted. There is no way to refuse her. All right. 10 minutes later, Extra He Yaoting made his official debut. For the first time doing this kind of thing, He Yaoting didn't know where to start. Usually, there are a bunch of big men around, even the assistants are men, and they speak rough. Gentle, childlike, what is that? Do not know. The only two women around him, one of his relatives, it was too late for him to hide, the one of his niece, it was too late to hide from him. Standing at the door of the activity room, facing a lively little cub in the room, I don't know where to start for a while. He gritted his teeth secretly, regretting it, why did he come, why he promised her, why did he find his own guilt? This job is just right for Qin Hao. Already standing here, it is impossible to retreat. He swept around and met a little girl with his gaze. Then you. He walked straight to the first row, squatted down to look at the girl, handed a piece of candy over, and touched the girl's head. My boy, are you called Xingxin? It's not perfect, the voice is a little deep, just add some gentleness. The little girl stared at this clean and refreshing young uncle, without any precautions. How do you know? I'm your mother's friend. She hurt her foot. Let me take you home. Xin thought for a moment, do you know my mother? He Yaoding nodded, my mother's name is Zhou Ying, right? Xin nodded. The children's basic information has been prepared in advance to wear the badges on their bodies. He Yaoding put all the remaining candies in her hand, go home with uncle, okay. Xin nodded again, ran to the shelf and retrieved her small school bag and water cup, which was taken away by He Yaoding. It seems to be a little too easy. Next, He Yaoding gradually became better, one by one, with fruitful results. Even when he led a little girl by using, he smiled triumphantly at her. In the observation room, the parents gradually calmed down. No one is going to discuss TV dramas and cosmetics anymore, and the expressions of parents are getting more and more serious. Xin's mother was a little bit unbelievable, my daughter was just taken away. I clearly told her that she is not allowed to talk to strangers. With the live video broadcast in real time, more and more children are easily taken away. A piece of candy, a cartoon, a sentence that grandma is sick, let me take you home. The hearts of the children are clean and pure. But some people are not. This is just an exercise. There are too many unknowns in life. The 1-second distraction of the parent and teacher may be the 1-second opportunity needed by those with a heart. After the exercise, the parents left the room and took their children one after another. After the children knew that this was a test, they were very scared. Perhaps this time they were deeply impressed. He Yaoding's car stopped a few hundred meters away. He got out early, moved the car and parked it across the road, wanting to take her to dinner. Several people came out from the door, and Yuzing walked behind. He fastened his seatbelt and prepared to start the car. Yuzing was talking on the phone while holding his mobile phone, walked to the side of the street, glanced in the direction of the traffic, and suddenly waved to a short distance. A private car stopped soon. There was a man in the car, familiar, but couldn't remember who it was. She smiled at the man, talked, and finally got into his car. He Yaoding stared at the car disappearing at the corner of the street, his fingers squeezed on the steering wheel, his thin lips pressed into a line. I subconsciously want to call her. The hand is faster than the brain, the number has been dialed, and he immediately hung up. His brows frowned unconsciously, which felt weird and irritable. A few seconds later, he started the car, the steering wheel was hit to death, and he drove in the other direction. After half an hour, the car drove to Lesi Yupin Cultural Park. Lesi Yupin's headquarters is not located in the city center, but in a not particularly prosperous area around the 5th Ring Road. A small area has been circled, and it has built its own office building, distribution warehouse, staff dormitory, and canteen. Activity room, outdoor court. Even the internet says that people who work at Lesi Yupin are blessed. There is a small warehouse on the first floor of the office building, where He Yaoding stores some personal belongings. He entered through the side door and came out after a while, carrying 2 bottles of Fenjiu in his hand. There was a sound at the end of the corridor. This side is a small warehouse, utility room, and power distribution room. Few people come over. He looked at it carefully. A figure came out of the power distribution room. His profile was very strange. He was probably a new electrician. He hadn't seen it before. The figure flashed past, and quickly disappeared at the entrance of the corridor. He stared at the power distribution room for a while, then turned and left. The place he was going was not far from here, a 15-minute drive away, at an old crossroads. To the northwest of the intersection is a small 2-story building. The outer wall has been repainted and looks very new. It is a bookstore that specializes in buying used books, old newspapers, comic book comics, out-of-print books, and everything. He Yaoding carried the wine and pushed the door in. The old brass bell hanging on the door jingled, but there was no one in the room. This old man is always casual. He didn't see anyone in his shop for 10.5 months, and he was not afraid of losing things. The furnishings in the room are messy, several walls are full of lattice bookshelves, all the way to the ceiling, all kinds of books and papers are full. He Yaoding put the wine on the table, and when he looked down, he saw a mobile phone lying on the floor in the corner of the table. He bent over and stretched out his hand to catch it. He touched the cold ground with his fingers, and all of his rubbing fingers were grey. He cursed secretly and came again. There was a hearty laugh from a little old man behind him. Cao Yi raised the curtain and walked out of the back room with a smile on his face. Are you here? It is said that he is a little old man. In fact, he is only about 50, but just like those who like to learn to do art, he makes himself stubble, and he is born with many folds, and he is very old. I usually love to write and draw, but I am quite talented. I often paint fake things out of real ones. He drew a bucket at the corner and a socket on the wall, which was quite three-dimensional, and it looked like it was real at first glance, and he Yaoding went back to be fooled. He gritted his teeth and kicked the fake phone on the ground. I'm not serious. Cao Yi was not angry either. Seeing Fenjiu on the table, his eyes were straight, his eyebrows were open and he smiled. Ka vacated the small table, chess set, 2 small wine cups, one on each side. Come on, do a game. He loves Fenjiu, saying that he likes the refreshing and mellow energy. He Yaoding took off his jacket and just stayed aside, rolling up his sleeves and sitting opposite him. Before he took a few steps, Cao Yi took a sip of his wine without looking at him. Let's talk, what's the matter? He Yaoding moved a step. It's okay to see you. Cao Yi hummed, come on, I don't know you yet. In the past 2 years, you have come to me for a drink because you were upset. I don't understand what happened last time or financing integration. What happened again? Cao Yi and He Yaoding are iron buddies from generation to generation. The two had known each other many years ago. At that time, He Yaoding was still in school. Whenever he had a fight with someone, he ran to hide here. Father, he dared to go home only after he was relieved. Over time, this place is more like a hideaway from the world to him, and it is also a place to relieve stress and irritability. He paused. It's not the company's business. Cao Yi raised his eyebrows. Is that home? Shook his head. Cao Yi came with interest. Woman. He does not speak. Cao Yi slapped his thigh and laughed. Good boy, finally got the hang of it. Do you have a girl you like? He Yaoding frowned. I don't know. After a few seconds, he changed his words. Maybe. Cao Yi nodded, looking like a person coming over. I understand. The hazy state is the most difficult to understand. Can't be grasped. Can't be grasped. Can't put it down. He Yaoding glanced at him. You understand again. Cao Yi's eyes widened, and the folds on his face became deeper. Why don't I understand? When I was your age, my ex-girlfriend could make up a table of mahjong. He Yaoding suddenly greeted him behind. Aunt Chuang. Cao Yitang bounced from the chair, smiling like a flower. My wife, I just joked with him. There is no one behind. Cao Yi turned his head and glared at him. Dare to shave Lao Zi. He Yaoding said, the desire to survive is quite strong. Someone called Cao Yi, and he picked it up, and after hearing a few words, he got frustrated. Damn, can you do it? I told you to keep it for me. You're the short of it. He Yaoding raised his eyes to look at him. After I hung up the phone, Cao Yi was still scolding. In 1957, The Romance of the Three Kingdoms comic book published by Shanghai People's Fine Arts Publishing House was a set of 60 copies. I stumbled and didn't get it, and was bought by someone else after such a long time. There are so many people who are worried about a good thing. I should take it down as soon as I know it, and I won't be able to meet it until a few years later. Cao Yi talked a lot, and wanted to ask He Yaoding whether he was so obscure, not to say he should play chess quickly. Who knows, He Yaoding is the same as he is going to be immortal. His eyes are open and there is no focus. Cao Yi stretched out his hand and shook it before his eyes. What do you want? He Yaoding's eyes moved, and he had no intention of playing chess at all. He got up. I'm leaving now. Cao Yi cursed. Who? Chess addiction hooks up and doesn't accompany me. He Yaoding went back to the car and grabbed a cigarette case and a lighter, then leaned on the driver's door and lit a cigarette in the cold wind. The smoke dangled in front of his eyes, circling around and out of the shadow of Yu Xing. For He Yaoding, Yu Xing from 12 years ago is a very special existence. At that time, when I was young, it was too early to say that love was too early. At best, it was just the little throbbing that a growing boy would have. His feelings for Yu Xing are more dependent, trusting, and even a little adoring. She was very strong at that time, with good grades, good popularity, can play the piano, and was the squadron leader of the school. Can also help him fight. She left without saying goodbye, and He Yaoding was secretly sad for a long time. After so many years, I went around and met her again. She was gentle and slender, less childish, more feminine, and made him feel protective out of thin air. Always think of her, always want to see her, want to take care of her, want to be nice to her. He directly squeezed out the cigarette with his fingertips. A thought gradually became clear. Those feelings, dependence, trust, and admiration towards Yu Xing back then seemed to have undergone subtle changes from when in another beautiful form, it exists. The author has something to say. Random 30 red envelopes. The other side. A clean and elegant tea house with 2 compartments. Shen Tingyu lighted the pot of Dongting Biluakun, cleaned his hands, and wiped it with the grey handkerchief he brought with him. Yu Xing sat on the opposite side, his eyes pure. Sorry, I have an appointment with you, and I want you to pick it up. Shen Tingyu smiled. It's okay to drop by. He has always been smart, and there are more people who like his paintings, but no one, especially such a young girl, dares to ask for his contact information so directly. Shen Tingyu smiled, his expression was impeccable, and he said what he was thinking. Ms. Yu has something to say. She had already reported her name just now in the car. Yu Xing didn't expect him to be so straightforward, but she was not good at polite scenes. She nodded and stared at Shen Tingyu. I have a painting in my hand, paused. It's exactly the same as your shadow. It's exactly the same. It's not accurate. Except for printing, there can't be 2 identical paintings in the world, even by the same author. This is the same as there are no 2 eggs of the same shape in the world. But the composition, color scheme, and exquisite detail design are indeed the same. Shen Tingyu's fingertips holding the teacup visibly paused. This panic was fleeting, and he raised his eyebrows. Oh! Yu Xing observed the subtle changes in his expression. Shen Tingyu took a sip of tea. That picture has been around for more than 20 years. It's not surprising that someone copied it. Yu Xing said, the date of the signature of that painting is before shadow. There is no signature in the painting. The eyes of the 2 crossed, and for a long time, Shen Tingyu said, what does Miss Yu mean? Yu Xing pursed his lips. Sorry, I have no intention of offending, but that painting may be related to a person who is particularly important to me, so I took the liberty to come to you. That painting was created much earlier than Shadow. Yu Xing is not a connoisseur. It is not clear whether the 2 paintings were made by the same person. It is related to Shen Tingyu's reputation. If he really copied someone else's painting, then he must know who the original is. Yu Xing considered it very clearly that whether he deceived the public and used the copying of the painting as the original has nothing to do with her. As long as he tells her the information of the original creator, she is willing to give him the evidence. But if both of these paintings were made by him, Yuzing looked at the gentleman in front of him. Is this person the one that mother will never forget forever? A few seconds after she was distracted, Shen Tingyu had already spoken, how to prove that your words are true. Yuzing was ready to open the phone, click into the album, find a photo, and push the phone over. This is the original I took. Shen Tingyu swept his gaze, the pen was drawn, the lines were squiggly, and he knew it with just one glance. He slowed down and looked up. Who is Zhang Hengmei from you? He said the name directly, and Yuzing's heart was pounding. It's my mother. Where is she now? She has passed away. Shen Tingyu raised her eyebrows instantly, her eyes shaking. She's dead. When the voice fell, Shen Tingyu felt that the words were inappropriate, and Shen Tingyu's volume was slightly lowered. When did it happen? Yuzing didn't answer this question, only staring at Shen Tingyu. You really know my mother? So, did you give her this painting? This night, Yuzing could not sleep. The family moved to a foreign country that year. My father's work was not going well. The couple started quarreling day and night. Not long after, the mother was seriously ill. She had been in the doctor for many years but could not save herself. She died a year later, less than 2 years later. The stepmother came in. The stepmother is also a Chinese. The first half of the year was fine. She was not very intimate but not too alienated. She maintained the surface peace and did not treat her badly. Until that rainy night. She was only 16 years old that year. I came out to drink water in the middle of the night and heard the fierce quarrel between the father and the stepmother in the room. The stepmother said, "She is not yours, why should we raise her?" Up to now, Yuzing still clearly remembered his reaction at that time. Fingers were cold, and he stubbornly grabbed the glass of water and rubbed it out of their room step by step. The father's voice came from inside, "You keep your voice down. She has no relatives and no reason. Who will care about her when she is sent back to the country? Besides, she called me dad since she was born. I can't do this. Didn't you say that her father paints and can't raise children? I only heard her mother mention it once, and I don't even know what the person's name is. How can I find it?" Still arguing inside, Yuzing's small body leaned against the wall and slowly sat on the ground, burying himself deeply in his knees. That night, no one knew what happened outside the door. She didn't mention it to anyone. The loss of his mother is already a serious injury, and it turns out that the father is not the father either. She carefully guarded her only dignity, lived and studied as usual, but no longer asked to buy things other than necessities. Later, I had a younger brother. The 3 of them are a family. She is sensitive, and she will only answer a question from her father inadvertently. Also gradually became speechless. When he was 18 years old, Yuzing moved out of the house under the pretext that he wanted to be independent and wanted to exercise. She rented one of the small bedrooms in a single-family house. The neighbor is a few Chinese students. She usually attends classes and works part-time. She does several jobs every day, and only goes back to see her father on holidays. Only she knows how she came here in those few years. Until the first half of this year, she saw the painting in her mother's relics. It was something her mother had cherished for a lifetime. Yuzing's mind gradually became more active, wondering if the painting might be related to her biological father. Not for anything else, just for my own peace of mind. No matter what kind of grievances they had back then, that was after all their only relatives in this world. Even if the adoptive father was kind to her, it could not stop the blood thicker than water. She didn't want to be confused, and never know who her biological father was for the rest of her life. So he returned home. She hardly made any choice, and went straight to the capital. The happiest days in life are the most unscrupulous, self-willed, coquettish, arrogant, those beautiful things that are gone forever. It's all here. In the first few months, she had no clue. The relatives on the mother's side could not count on it, and could not find it. She was hard-tempered, and her boyfriend who was opposed to her talks back then, she ran away from home and completely cut off contact with her family. Yuzing always thought that man is the foster father. Thinking about it now, it's probably for the biological father. I don't know what the mother experienced in those years. She was pregnant with a child, but left her biological father and married her adoptive father. Yuzing didn't have much savings, so he found a kindergarten as a part-time piano teacher. Until one day she saw a piece of news that the famous painter Shen Tingye will start a 7-day solo exhibition in the capital. The attached picture has his photos and representative works, one of which is his famous work, Shadow. So she went to that art exhibition. Yuzing lay on the bed, closed his eyes, the light of the night light was dim and yellow, and the sleep aid incense seemed to have no effect. Today, Shen Tingye did not answer her question at the end. I will tell you after seeing that painting. He is going to another place tomorrow, and they will meet as soon as they make an appointment. Take her picture with you. He Xiling made a surprise attack this time to celebrate Tang Huili's birthday, but it was unsuccessful. It is said that Tang Huili didn't go home at midnight. She called and he said that he was socializing. He Xiling was disappointed, but she also felt sorry for her husband's hard work every day. She didn't play tricks, and the two men made up their birthday the next day, and she hurried back, because it was the day when Xiaomi played in 2 days. This is the first performance in Xiaomi's life. The performance was scheduled half a month ago. The kindergarten contacted the shopping mall and decided to hold a cultural performance in the central hall on the first floor of the shopping mall at 10 o'clock this morning. The children rehearsed for this performance for half a month and prepared 8 programs. The stage has been set up and there is still half an hour left. Behind the large LED screen is a temporary backstage. The children from the first 3 shows have already dressed up. Yuzing squatted halfway to adjust the position of the princess crown for Xiaomi. She wore a pair of blue jeans, low-waisted and self-cultivating, and a loose milky white sweater on the upper body. The neckline faintly revealed a nice collarbone. A heart-shaped colorful gold collarbone chain made her skin white. Xiaomi stood obediently and let her take care of herself. Xiao put on makeup on her face, pasted with sequins of Buletin Ling, a curly head with 2 soaring twitches, and her hair was curled up and exploded on her forehead. Yuzing carefully clamped the broken hair with small clips, and squeezed her small chin. Are you ready? Xiaomi replied loudly, ready. Not long after, the principal called for someone, and the host began. Billiards hall on the 3rd floor. In the morning, there were not many people, and a dozen tables were mostly empty. The innermost table was near the railing. He Yaoding took off his jacket and wore only a casual thin sweater. He lowered his body and put the cue on his slender and powerful fingers. The black ball goes into the hole. Clear Taiwan in 1 shot. Qin Hao on the side was not angry, also let people not play. De Zhou said, don't take him next time. He Yaoding glanced at the 2 of them and looked at Qin Hao, the healthcare expert smokes. Be careful to be seen by your leader. Qin Hao was nervous, and subconsciously hid the cigarette in his mouth behind him, and glanced around. Who has smoked? Can I have a dry addiction after 2 bites? He Yaoding ignored him. He twisted the bottle of water and poured his head up half of the bottle. A few drops of crystals fell on the corners of his lips and slipped into the collar along the rolling point of his neck. As soon as the downstairs sound was turned on, it was rumbling and deafening. He Yaoding stood his cue in the corner and put his arm on the railing to look down. The children on the stage were able to jump vigorously. The C position turned out to be Xiaomi, wearing a crown and a little white gauze skirt. Music is a song he hasn't heard before, anyway, it is the kind that is sweet and lively. There are 3 floors inside and 3 floors outside the stage, part of which are parents, and more are passing by to watch the excitement. At the front of the crowd, there was a girl dancing vigorously. Because she wanted to remind the children, she moved as wide as possible, very hard, loosely a ponytail, and her fine bangs swayed up and down with her movements. The beautiful scenery is always irresistible, and some of the phones that used to take pictures of children have been quietly pointed at using at some point. He Yaoding frowned. Everyone, the good children didn't shoot, but the teacher. Qin Hao and De Zhou also came to join in the fun. The men are together, and the topic of discussion is always inseparable from the woman. De Zhou's eye thief, he glanced at the most eye-catching Yuzing in the crowd. He is a little short-sighted. Although he can't see his face, he has a good figure. No more. Hey, the girl in white clothes in the middle, the dancing one, did you see that leg and waist? Is the quality of kindergarten teachers so high now? Where? Qin Hao also leaned forward, leaning out half of his body quickly, and squinted his eyes to take a closer look. Really, there should be some skinny ones, hey? He wondered, why look a little bit thin? Familiar, old he, this girl looks like your classmate. The voice fell, and there was no response for a long time. Qin Hao turned his head, the person next to him looked gloomy. Smelly face is okay. The author has something to say, random 30 red envelopes?